protest demonstrations are easy. See, don't get it. They banned the volunteers from the U.S. Mountain Home. Promise power. So I want to see the kid on the and looking at the Gaza was they were closer. You know what I mean? Maybe some food shipments going in or something. I don't know. But you want to take pictures? Yeah, I want to take pictures. Yeah. They don't let you take it. Well, no, but I'm saying I think this will make it so that they get stopped. I could show him I'm a legitimate journalist. Well, you could do. Yeah, well, some of it will be fine, and some of it won't be so fine. From what I've heard, maybe in the Spanish method that by D, whereas the demonstrations, no big deal.
Physical thing or more of a mental thing?
Oh, it's physical. It's like I'm doing it.
It varies. Oh. I don't know. I think these things are so quick that I haven't even started detailed arrangements other than applying for the president because last week was like this, next week will be something else. They're already
So they are asking you also to pay them?
well, I sent them, and now they want me to sign this contract. This one sign of $7 pays there, and I sent them a contributor contract saying, I'll get paid, and they refused. They don't do anything to be comfortable, so I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting any day, I'll get an email from this guy saying, sorry, or okay. I don't know. Well, most of them don't work like I do, they're on staff somewhere. If you work for AP, they know what it is. And they can probably show you a contract between you and AP, you know, 5 days a week. I don't work like that, so. We'll see. Worst case, I'll just wander around.
Oh my god, lately I've been getting home and then I'm like, yeah, I don't care that it's 8 p.m. I'm like feeding my dog, walking my dog, going to bed.
Well, the crop sensor,
Well,
like the A6700.
I think the
crop sensor.
shutdown burnout
So
is definitely
cameras like this,
starting to
the
hit.
AC, you know, the A7C, you know, those are slow, but the lenses are slow, and it's only a crop sensor, so it's much better to travel.
And it's good quality?
It's pretty good. I mean, it won't compete with the low light, these are better, these are full frame. But I got some of the residents, got this one, a couple of 1.4 and 1.8 lenses that will hopefully make up the difference.
I get that.
We'll see. Maybe I'll look at it.
Or not algorithm. Yeah, analytics.
Hopefully that's not a problem. I'm not intending to go anywhere that's not safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, good morning, everyone.
A few of our colleagues will be joining us momentarily as well. We want to be respectful of everyone's time here as well, so we want to get started here. So again, just a reminder of what happened during the Republican government shutdown. As you all know, and most of you have reported, the first time in America's history that SNAP benefits were cut off, were held. First time in America's history since SNAP was created that funding was not supported to go forward, even though there was two funds, $5 billion in one, $23 billion in another. We've now learned from lower courts, federal courts, that the administration should have been moving this funding as well. There's no question that this administration should not have been moving forward and should not have allowed the funding to lapse. Now, President Trump made a deliberate choice to leave families hungry, to leave families without food. His choice. The courts were absolutely clear that this legal authority existed. Even the Secretary of the United States Department of Agriculture, weeks before the program was put on hold, had the justification and had the plan on the website, which magically disappeared and was pulled down when the cruelty was set to begin. What President Trump did was fight to keep food away from families who are already struggling, creating more chaos, more confusion, which has been what we've been seeing day in and day out. Now, in July, congressional Republicans passed something called the Big Beautiful Bill, I think is what they called the thing, right? folks back home have been calling this thing a betrayal. But since President Trump came to Capitol Hill to try to convince Republicans that they needed to rebrand the big, beautiful bill because it's so unpopular across America, we should just keep calling it the big, beautiful bill because the American people think it's disgusting. Now, as it pertains to SNAP and why we're here today, the Congressional Budget Office estimates are about $187 billion is what Republicans cut from food programs. $187 billion in food assistance over the next decade at a time when costs are rising for families across the country. Everything, as we know, is getting more and more expensive. And that's quite honestly why we're here today. For half a century, our nation has upheld a bipartisan promise to ensure that no child, no senior, no veteran, no working family should go hungry in the United States of America. Republicans broke that promise, and today congressional Democrats are fighting to restore this program. I want to recognize the leadership from so many of our colleagues. Senator Merkley, who is here with us today, Representative Hayes, Representative Craig, who's a ranking member of the Agriculture Committee, and of course, Leader Schumer, and Senator Klobuchar, the ranking member of the Senate Ag Committee. We are introducing legislation that restores food security for American families and farmers, to fully repeal the Republican cuts to SNAP, restore food security for millions of Americans. SNAP puts food on the table for 42 million people across the country. They're not strangers. They're friends that we all know, coworkers, people that we might go to church with or go to a ball game with, kids that you know. If you have children who are in school, they might play with your kids. Your kids probably play with them. This is an American issue. There are people across the country who you probably stand in line with when you're checking out at a grocery store. Everyday folks. Right now, they face the real possibility of going hungry because of the choices made by President Trump and congressional Republicans. Now, this year, many of us have visited food banks and met with families, farmers, ranchers, all across our states, and for me, all across New Mexico. They told me how essential SNAP is to caring for their children, getting through the week, or just keeping their businesses open. When SNAP is cut, real people suffer. Our constituents suffer. These families are doing everything they can. They're working hard. They're raising children. They're caring for loved ones. They're just trying to build a better life. They deserve a government that helps them put food on the table, not one that takes food away. My Republican colleagues have chosen to let their constituents go hungry. My legislation will stop that. We must ensure that no child, no senior, no veteran, and no hardworking family is denied the basic dignity of a meal. I want to recognize my colleague from Oregon who has been steadfast on providing clarity to the negative impact to the American people coming from this administration and from ugly legislation like the big, beautiful bill. Senator Merkley, United States Senator of Oregon.
Thank you so much, Ben Ray. And Senator Luján's state and my state of Oregon are two of the three states that have the highest SNAP participation. And we're so acutely aware of the impact of the cuts to this program on the folks in our respective states. The third state is Louisiana. You know, a week from today, most of us will be gathering with our families for Thanksgiving. And it's a time where food plays a central role as we celebrate together the blessings that we might have had. But in all too many households across this country, that Thanksgiving table is going to be pretty bare. Back when I was in high school, my high school organized a food drive in November before Thanksgiving. We had an assembly right before Thanksgiving, and we would line up all the Campbell soup cans and little sculptures and displays and try to get every single student to participate. And in my senior year, I was the organizer of that food drive. I live in a blue-collar community, and was canvassing houses for food. I figured if I'm organizing the food drive, I better make sure I put extra effort into going door to door. And I come to one particular house, and the woman who answered the door, and an older woman, she heard me ask if she would like to contribute to the food drive. And she paused, and then she said, "The only cans I have in my cupboard are the cans I just brought from the food bank." And I said, "Oh, well, of course, the whole goal is to restock the food bank. So thank you very much, and I'm glad you were able to visit the food bank. We want to make sure other families are able to get food because the demand on the food banks is very high when winter comes." She said, no. She says, "I have to contribute." And she brought me into her house, and she opened up her cupboards, and they were completely bare except for this set of cans that she had just brought from the food bank. And she insisted that I take one of those cans. And I think about how, because she understood that there are other families in the same state she was in, she was ready to open her cupboard and donate a little from what she had. But we're living in a world now in America where too many leaders do not connect with that world. It's a philosophy of, if you will, the red carpet for the rich and the red tape for the poor. And all this year, Trump has been pursuing a Make America Hungry Again agenda. In January, he froze the funding for SNAP and Meals on Wheels. In March, he slashed $1 billion from farm to school lunch programs. In April, he implemented tariffs that raised the cost of food. In July, he cut almost $200 billion from SNAP. Why? To fund tax breaks for billionaires. And in November, he illegally refused to fund SNAP benefits even when the courts ordered him to do so. This bill, and I'm pleased to ally myself with my colleague from New Mexico and all of these champions to take on hunger across America. This bill is about saying that's wrong. It's wrong to have great Gatsby parties for the rich and bare Thanksgiving tables for vulnerable, struggling families. So those cuts need to be restored, and this bill will do it. And we should have 100 senators and every member of the House signing on to make this happen, and I hope we will.
United States Representative Hayes.
Good afternoon. I'm Congresswoman Johanna Hayes from the state of Connecticut, and I am honored to be the lead along with Ranking Member Angie Craig on the House side for this legislation. But this is a very familiar place for me. I have pushed back against SNAP in the Farm Bill negotiations, in the debt ceiling negotiations, in every budget that we've passed since I've been in the Congress. We saw very recently how fragile food security is in this country when just the delay of SNAP benefits put so many families at risk. But we are not beyond this crisis, because once the provisions from H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill, kick in, more families will be at risk. We keep hearing about the 42 million American children the 42 million Americans who are affected by SNAP. But what I'd like for you to consider is that 39% of that number is children. When I came to the Congress, I asked for two committees on purpose: the Committee of Education and Labor and the Committee of Agriculture. As a classroom teacher, I understood that hungry kids don't learn, and nothing that we do in a school matters if kids are hungry when they get there. And that has guided my work. But not just as a member of Congress, I happen to be a member who is deeply aware of how those dots connect. I grew up in a family that relied on SNAP. As a young mother, I made the decisions that many of these parents are making today about whether they pay a bill or buy groceries. I know what all this means. Right now, we are looking at devastating cuts, but I think that there really isn't a true appreciation for the reciprocal impacts of these cuts. If families and children lose access to SNAP, they automatically lose their categorical eligibility for free and reduced lunch. Parents who would otherwise not have to apply for WIC would have to apply. So we would see children hurt across the spectrum. In the United States of America, in 2025, we have the ability to feed children. These are policy choices. And the fact that at the exact same time, $187 billion was cut from SNAP programs, tax cuts for the wealthiest, most well-connected individuals and corporations. There's something wrong with that. Kids don't have lobbyists. They don't have advocacy groups. They don't have people here fighting to make sure that they don't go to bed hungry. But they have us. And as legislators, as members of Congress, we all should be invested in making sure that no one in this country goes to bed hungry, because we have the ability to do that. Not just children, disabled individuals, veterans, elderly people, all who at one time may have been exempt from these work provisions, no more. So we're going to see devastating cuts in our community. We're going to see our friends, our neighbors, and maybe even some of our family members who are going to have to deal with this. I am encouraged by what we've seen over the last few weeks, where communities have come together, where food drives have been established, where schools are giving children brown bag lunches to take home over the weekend, all of these things. But we should not have this patchwork system to come together to make sure our children are fed. When, for as long as this program, SNAP, has been established, there has been a bipartisan consensus that we would feed our people. That has been broken. That is something that we've seen time and time again that is under attack. And just because the benefits went out in November, I am happy that you are all here to make sure that the American people know that this fight is not over. And as for me and my time in Congress, I will continue the work to make sure that our children in this country are fed, and everybody for that matter. And with that, I'd like to introduce the ranking member of the House Agriculture Committee.
We're going to go to leadership. So, Democrat.
I may have to pop out. I have a markup as well. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, I was about to defer.
Democratic leader of the United States Senate, Chuck Schumer. Thanks, Shauna.
Immediately.
Sorry about that, but I got to go to the floor.
Thanks, Angie.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank Ben Ray Luján, a great leader of our subcommittee in charge of food. Senator Klobuchar couldn't make it, but is on our side. She's ranking member of Agriculture, and Jeff Merkley was here. And I want to thank our great Congress members, Johanna Hayes, who just left, and Angie Craig, the ranking member of the Ag Committee, who does such a great job fighting for kids' food. And I want to thank Crystal Fitzsimmons, who knows more than just about anybody what this fight is about. And we thank you for your work at Food Research and Action Center. Well, SNAP isn't an abstract policy. It's not just a number. SNAP is food. SNAP is dignity. SNAP is survival for over 42 million Americans. 42 million Americans. These are kids trying to grow, seniors trying to stay healthy, veterans trying to get back on their feet, parents who skip meals so their children don't have to. This summer, the Republican Big Ugly Bill was the single largest cut of federal food assistance in our nation's history. Excuse me. Today, we're introducing legislation to reverse these disastrous and deadly cuts and restore food security for millions of Americans. Republicans ripped food off the table. I mean, this was cruel. It was heartless. Previous Republican administrations never did this. Food off the table of millions of families. Why? To give tax breaks to billionaires. Now, I don't have anything against billionaires. They made a lot of money. God bless them. But they don't need a tax break, period. And they certainly don't need a tax break at the expense of hungry kids. Hungry kids. But it wasn't that they didn't even stop there. During the shutdown, The Trump administration did something no administration in modern history has ever done. They pit hungry kids against sick kids. Oh, they use them as hostages during the shutdown. They marched into court twice to block families from receiving SNAP benefits, and it goes further. Now Brooke Rollins, the secretary, is threatening to make millions of low-income Americans reapply for food assistance. We know what they're up to. These are poor people. They're struggling. And they want people who actually deserve it not to be able to fill out the forms properly so they can cut them. It's vicious. It's nasty. It sucks. So, with Thanksgiving right around the corner, the food banks in my state, and I'm sure in every other state, are just overwhelmed. American families are continuing to struggle as grocery prices hit a record high, $1,000 a month for an average family of 4. Imagine that. Because of Trump's tariffs, his disastrous policies. Food is not a political issue, never has been until the Republicans made it that way. It's a moral issue. It's what our Bible teaches us, our religious teachings, to feed the hungry and give water to the thirsty. It's a question of what kind of country we want to be. Do we help families keep food off the table, or do we make them collateral damage in someone's political game? I thank everybody and appreciate it. Sorry I have to come and run. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you, sir. The ranking member of the House of Representatives Agriculture Committee, Representative Angie Craig.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Luján, for bringing us all here today on a bicameral basis. The $187 billion cut to SNAP benefits that my colleagues describe are absolutely staggering. And make no mistake about it, the entire intention of those cuts is to kick people off the program and to shift those costs to the states, which Minnesotans are starting to understand is going to increase their property taxes. Because in 10 states across this country, it's the counties who have to fund both the administrative and the actual cost of SNAP. The paperwork, the red tape, the hoops that Republicans want to make hungry families and seniors jump through just to secure $2 to help cover the cost of a meal during one of the greatest affordability crisis in our country as it relates to food cost is absolutely egregious. By cutting the heart out of SNAP, that wasn't good enough for President Trump or his administration. And that is truly terrifying, truly horrifying, and frankly, it pisses me the hell off. If I see Secretary Rollins one more time on TV, creating more anxiety for poor Americans when they are helped by $6.20 at a time when no one can afford their groceries. Just think about what Americans are about to experience over the Thanksgiving holidays as they go to their local grocery store to try to put the family Thanksgiving meal together. At the same time, they're opening their portal on their health care account and looking at their health care premiums going up dramatically. During the longest government shutdown in history, President Trump and Secretary Rollins chose to illegally withhold food assistance from 42 million Americans, including 16 million children. Think about what kind of heartless person you would have to be to withhold food from 16 million children. Our community stepped forward to try to close just a little bit of that gap, but it's absolutely disgusting, and they show for sure who they are. At the same time, Secretary Rollins goes on TV and talks about all the fraud. Folks, this most effective anti-hunger program in our history has a fraud rate of 1.6%. It's actually one of the most effective, well-run programs in the country. And by the way, folks, guess who runs it? Our states. Our states run it. And when they make mistakes in error rates, you know what happens? They have to pay a fine and create revenue to the federal government. You know what else? There are already work requirements in SNAP. The bullshit this administration is peddling is egregious. When congressional Democrats, 26 attorneys general, and 2 federal courts said they needed to help feed America, the Trump administration appealed it all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, Secretary Rollins has launched a national propaganda campaign, and I'm telling you this, I'm fighting her propaganda every step of the way. And I'm warning my Republican colleagues, if you bring your propaganda to the Ag Committee, when we start getting back on the House side, every single lie that you tell while your mouth is moving, I am going to call it out. We need Republicans to show just a little bit of compassion. If not for people, how about the affordability crisis in this country? How about they realize that their own constituents can't afford their grocery cost? They can't afford their health care costs. We need to make sure that America's hungry can afford food. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Crystal Fitzsimmons, President, Food Research and Action Center.
Great, thank you so much. And I am so honored to be here to talk about this amazing bill. FRAC is honored to endorse the bill, and we are endorsing it with 1,500 groups across the country, national, state, and local groups who are all supporting the bill. FRAC is a national anti-hunger organization, and we are focused on building a nation free from hunger. The cuts to SNAP that were made through H.R. 1 were a direct assault against the SNAP program. The SNAP program is our most effective anti-hunger program. It improves health, it lifts millions of people out of poverty, and it helps 42 million people across the country. This includes kids, senior citizens, people with disabilities, veterans who have served our country, put food on the table, and keep hunger at bay. There were so many problems with the SNAP cuts that were in the bill, and it is so exciting to see this bill reverse all of them, but I'm just gonna lift up a couple. One of the things that this bill did for the first time was that it shifted benefit costs over to the states, so increasing the cost of operating the SNAP program. This is an undue burden for states, and we know that states across the country cannot afford it. We do expect some states to actually drop out of the program because of these increased costs. And you know what happens when a state drops out of SNAP? Every single person in that state who's eligible for SNAP loses access to those benefits. For the states who stay in the program, we know that there is a pervasive, pernicious, horrible incentive for them to limit benefits and limit access. It also reduces benefit levels for millions of people and will cause millions of people to lose access to the program completely. The time limits that have been placed on new groups, including veterans, youth transitioning out of foster care, older adults, parents with kids who are 14 and over, those are going to start hitting in a couple months. And so families are going to start losing benefits in a few months because of this bill. We need to reverse the course. We need to recommit to building a nation free from hunger, and we need Congress to pass this bill now.
Well said. Well said. Any questions anyone may have?
Yes, Jerry Hagstrom from the Hagstrom Report. I'm wondering if one of you could tell us what's really going on in the states. Secretary Rollins said that the One Big Beautiful Bill provisions should go into effect on November 1st. Can you provide any enlightenment as to how this is actually working with the states, what the state agencies are doing at this point?
Yeah. Do you want to touch on that, Andy?
I can do that. Yeah, I was just in Washington County, one of the counties in my congressional district, about a week ago, and where the SNAP program is actually administered at the county level. And Jerry, what they're having to do is go back through every single recipient and look at, I'll give you a couple of examples of the Big Beautiful Bill changes. Does that individual have children who are younger than 14 years old, because if they do, they can stay on the program without work requirements. If they don't have children 14 and younger, then they are now subject to the work requirements in the bill. And remember, the House version put the child's age at 7 years old. So House Republicans were going to send single mothers with 8-year-olds back to work, and we're going to let them have to figure out, do I take my $6.20 a day for my child to get them help for food, or am I going to have some sort of health care, child care crisis? It's absolutely stunning. The other change was they raised the age for work requirements in the bill. So literally, from a state level, they are causing so much red tape, burdensome work. And keep in mind, no one who is able-bodied today can stay on the SNAP program for longer than 3 months. This is ridiculous. There are work requirements already. Able-bodied adults can only be on the program for 3 months for a certain period of time. They're already, it is one of the actual most well-designed programs. And remember, the goal is to get people off SNAP in the end. So if that's Republicans' goal, to get them off the SNAP program, to drive them off with all these new requirements, how about they just raise the damn minimum wage and index it to inflation? If you want people off SNAP, how about you help improve their lives so they don't need government assistance? That is not the Republican Party that we're dealing with here.
Well, so there's a lot of things that are going on in the states as they scramble to respond to H.R. 1. They are working very hard to improve error rates, which I think were mentioned earlier. They're not fraud, they're mistakes that are being made in the processing of applications, and, complicated measure, but it's not what people often think it is. But so states are working to improve their systems, to reduce their error rates, to scramble to try and reduce what their additional benefit costs are going to be when this kicks in October 2027. But the administrative costs shift, which is shifting the costs of administrative costs up to 75% for states. It was 50%, is leading to lots of tough conversations across the country in state legislatures about how they're going to fund those additional costs. States have been directed by USDA to start implementing the time limit. So as Congresswoman Craig said, states are figuring out who is now beholden to those time limits and starting to communicate that, and they could lose their benefits within the next couple of months. So there is a lot happening with the states. There's a lot of pressure there, and the states, are just recovering from all the chaos that we had during the shutdown when benefits were withheld.
And then, Jerry, just one last thing there. Look, as you take a step away from that question, remember that document that President Trump once denied existed called Project 2025? Now he talks about it a bit. Two of the architects of that document, who have their own think tanks, Russ Vought and Brooke Rollins, are now in the administration, one running OMB, ignoring the law, ignoring the Constitution, and the other at the United States Department of Agriculture. In that document, they targeted SNAP. They went after provisions in that. And so they said out loud what they were going to do, and now we're seeing the devastation. Make no mistake what they've been up to with these cruel choices. And it started with these think tanks as well. Yes? Yeah, Crystal, you want to jump in there first?
Sure, I can talk a little bit. Well, we know that SNAP reduces healthcare costs. We know it improves health. We know it improves birth outcomes for babies. So we expect there to be an impact on the health and well-being of our nation across the country. We also know that there is an economic impact of SNAP. For every dollar that somebody spends on SNAP, it generates up to $1.80 in economic activity. So that is really important in local communities. We know how important SNAP is to support local rural grocery stores, and so we're worried about that as well. So I think it's fair to say that there are huge hunger, health, economic concerns about moving forward with a $186 billion cut to SNAP.
Yeah, I'll just add that, this ends up being another war on family farmers that the administration is waging as well. 187 billion cuts to SNAP is $25 billion in direct revenue hit to America's family farmers. It's less food that is going to be purchased. It's jobs that will disappear because there's not as much food being driven to the retailers, the grocery stores, the workers who put the food on the shelves. This is an entire ecosystem that, of course, starts with the food grown by family farmers and ends with feeding hungry Americans. And so, this administration continues to demonstrate over and over and over again that, in fact, they don't love family farmers. In fact, they continue to decimate their markets, export markets, domestic markets. They're not expanding. Farm-to-food programs in our nation's schools, USAID, all of it adds up, and the SNAP program is $25 billion in direct revenue to family farmers that's gone, period.
And just to add a little bit to that component that Representative Craig so eloquently described with local farmers, it's not just the devastation to the SNAP programs. It's all of the other decisions that have been made by the Trump administration and Secretary Rowlands leading up to this. One of the first cuts announced when Elon Musk was still around was a cut to a program that worked with local farmers and ranchers that had contracts with food banks to get them their local food. Well, these farmers and ranchers don't just decide 1 week into the next what they're going to grow or what they're going to raise. They enter into these conversations and negotiations a year in advance. They change who they're going to sell their food to, how they're going to grow, what they're going to grow, and what they're going to get product to market. Well, from one day to the next, a program that existed and contracts that had already been signed were eliminated. That was blow number one to local farmers and ranchers. When you talk about the negative impact to this particular program, well, it hurts every corner of the United States. It's going to devastate in rural communities. Now, the reason I say that is think about rural grocery stores. So the cuts to health care already, the elimination of Medicaid dollars at the federal level by that big, beautiful bill is going to hurt rural health clinics. No one's been talking about rural grocery stores. I don't know, over 10%, 20% of the revenue that goes to these local grocery stores comes from SNAP beneficiaries. Think about the smallest towns all across America who work hard just to get that grocery store. I'm thinking of an incredible little co-op that was started in a small town in New Mexico because the other grocery stores left. So they said, we're going to do this. And you know who's going to be the owners of this thing? The farmers and ranchers that are supplying the food to it. What happens when these programs go away? Those rural grocery stores close. Now folks are having to travel not 30 minutes to get to a grocery store, but hours to try to find local food. I mean, it's problem on problem, but the devastation of farmers and ranchers, it is real and it needs to be understood. Think about the wellness to kids, just to grow up healthy. I mean, there's probably a lot of coffee drinkers in this room. How do you all feel when you don't drink your coffee in the morning? Can you imagine not getting food in your belly? How are you going to function? How are you going to work? What does that mean to your well-being when you're a young child and just trying to get through the day and learn? It's devastating. So I don't know that there's enough emphasis to describe the pain that has been intentionally sent to families in every corner of America and families that live in rural parts of the country like I do. This is horrible. Last question?
Senator Schumer mentioned USDA's reported plan to have users reapply for benefits, and it's also been reported that they're planning to eliminate broad-based categorical eligibility through TANF. I'm curious if the agency has shared any details on those plans with members of Congress, and if you plan on pushing back on those specific changes.
Why don't we hear from the ranking member first? Yeah.
We cannot confirm that with the agency. In fact, we're hearing off the record that, maybe people don't know what the hell they're talking about at the moment. In fact, I think they're trying to take credit for the already very strict standards and the actual low fraud rate in the SNAP program. It wouldn't surprise me at all if in 3 months Brooke Rollins doesn't go on TV and say, oh my gosh, we have a 1.6% fraud rate in the SNAP program. Isn't that amazing? So we can find no real plan there. Not even sure there's concepts of a plan there. But at the end of the day, I think they're just pointing out exactly how the program already runs, pretending that they're doing that when it's been in place for years. And now, in 3 months, they'll claim the error rate is 1.6% and take a victory lap. And when they do, we'll be right here to point out that that's exactly where it started. Just like the president's recent deal with China would take us back to the status quo on soybeans. And even the status quo, they've now only committed to 10% of that. So, look, if their mouth is moving right now, they're probably lying to us. And it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure that the American people know the truth, that we keep working to improve the program for hungry Americans, for family farmers, and at the end of the day, to make sure that this administration is held accountable.
And look, Representative Craig touched on this earlier, but a little bit about the bullshit. This is just another delay tactic. Again, I point to that Project 2025 document that is the guiding document for so many of these secretaries and the decisions being made by this administration. First, they say that they're not going to let people have food, and then they appeal decisions by the courts that said, no, you've got to do this. Appeal not to get people food. And then once, and remember, Secretary Rollins was one of the folks saying, open up the government and we'll get the food out. Well, then once that vote passed and the president signed the bill, she found another way to delay it. That's all the nonsense that we're seeing here is one decision after another coming from this administration that's raising the cost, the tariffs, hitting local farmers and ranchers as well, the cost of implements, fertilizer, whatever it is. Food's getting more expensive. Keep people from getting food, delay it more and more, and then try to show that there's some BS savings here. I can't say BS anymore, huh? Bullshit coming from these folks. And that's just what we're seeing time and time again. It's just so frustrating to see what's coming out of this stuff. But Angie, do you have something else?
I was just going to say, I'm glad it's permissible to say bullshit in the Senate.
Yeah. With that, everyone, I want to thank you all for being here today. Thanks again for covering this, for reporting on this as well, to my colleagues for the leadership, for what they've been doing, Crystal, for what the organization does every day. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Whether you're Democrat, you're Republican, conservative, liberal, progressive, whatever it is, y'all, there's a better way to do things in this country, and this is not it. Thank you for telling these stories and for making sure people understand what's really going on in this place, because it's not on the up and up. This is bad. It's bad for people. There's a better way to treat people with respect and dignity. Thanks for being here today. Thank you so much.